Hi, I'm Father Joseph Mary, and welcome back to A Simple Word, where we reflect on the gospel for the coming Sunday. There's a story told about Franklin Roosevelt, who often endured long receiving lines at the White House. He complained that no one really paid any attention to what was said. So one day during a reception, he decided to try an experiment. To each person who passed down the line and shook his hand, he murmured, "I murdered my grandmother this morning." The guests responded with phrases like, "Marvelous! Keep up the good work! We're proud of you! God bless you, Mr. President." It wasn't until the end of the line, while greeting the ambassador from Bolivia, that his words were actually heard. And somewhat startled, the ambassador leaned over and whispered, "I'm sure she had it coming." We live in a culture of noise. And even in this culture, we hear so many things about God. But are we really listening to the voice of God himself? Today we come to the first part of the much longer Good Shepherd narrative. But we have to see the broader context to understand what's really going on. It's winter in Jerusalem, and it's cold. Jesus is walking in Solomon's portico, a section of the temple with a colonnade of magnificent pillars almost 40 feet high, roofed over with a ceiling of gold. Jewish men walked there to pray, and rabbis sat there as they taught their disciples. The date was the Festival of the Dedication, or as it was more commonly called, the Festival of Lights, the Jewish Hanukkah that's still celebrated to this day. The feast commemorates one of the greatest acts of heroism in Jewish history. The Syrian king Antiochus Epiphanes, who reigned over Israel for 150 years before the birth of Christ, sought to extinguish the Jewish religion. He slaughtered 80,000 Jews and crucified countless Jewish women, hanging their newborn babies around their necks. But Judas Maccabeus led a fierce rebellion and slaughtered the Syrian armies in 164 BC. So during the Festival of Lights, 8 candles were lit in every window in every Jewish home. A reminder that no matter how dark it got, the light of hope still burns. So here's Jesus walking in Solomon's portico in the gray before dawn, surrounded by blazing candles that flickered off the walls and ceilings. And it's here that Jesus tells the people, "I am the light of the world." And this statement provokes a furious demand. If you're the Messiah, if you're truly the Christ of God, tell us plainly. Enough with the parables and the symbols. And essentially, Jesus says, my actions have said everything. It was the same response he gave to the messengers from John the Baptist. Tell John this, the blind regain their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have the good news proclaimed. But Jesus says, you refuse to believe because you refuse to listen, and so you don't follow me. But my sheep hear my voice, and they follow me. This whole conversation started with that. I am the good shepherd. I think we often have a fanciful and mistaken notion of what exactly a shepherd was and what he did. In the time of Jesus, shepherds were often groomed into the occupation from as young as 10 years old. The little shepherd grew up with his sheep. He slept outside with his sheep. He could distinguish each and every sheep in his flock with a simple glance. The shepherd grew to love his sheep, and the sheep knew the shepherd's voice, could distinguish that voice from any other. The shepherd protected the sheep from straying away, and especially from the danger of wild predators. Remember when David was tending sheep, he had to fight off a lion in service of his sheep. But there was also the hireling. There was a man hired to do a job. This was a man whose main interest was money. He didn't grow up with the sheep. He had no emotional attachments to them or to their well-being. They were merely a means to an end, things to be used and discarded. And when real danger came, the good shepherd stayed to fight, while the hireling fled for the hills. Jesus is comparing himself to the religious leaders of his time, but he's also giving us a lesson and a warning. Because in some ways, in all of our lives, we're shepherds. A father shepherds his family. A wife, in more ways than men might like to admit, shepherds her husband. Together they shepherd their family. Among your peers, with your friends, at work, at school, you're a shepherd. But the question in the gospel is, are you a good shepherd? Because a good shepherd loves the sheep. A good shepherd seeks the good of his sheep. A good shepherd leads his sheep to the right and the true and the good. A good shepherd leads his sheep into a relationship with God. An evil shepherd uses his sheep, abuses his sheep, leaves his sheep alone in danger, watches as his sheep wander off into destruction. And so in your life, among those who you're close to, are you a good shepherd? You can determine that quite simply by asking yourself two questions. First and foremost, do you take time to listen to the good shepherd? Do you take time to pray? Is there a moment in your daily life where you say everything stops now because it's time for me to be with God, to listen to the Master's voice? Second, do you take time to really listen to those entrusted to your care, your spouse, your children, your friends, the suffering? Do you really listen? During a study of teenage prostitutes living on the streets of San Francisco, the young women were asked, "Was there anything you needed most and couldn't get?" Their response was always preceded by sadness and tears, and it was unanimous. What I needed most was someone to listen to me, someone who cared enough to simply listen. As we continue this journey through Easter, let's strive to make time each day to listen to the voice of the Good Shepherd and to beg for the grace to truly listen to those around us, to the most desperate to be heard. I'm Father Joseph Mary, and thanks for listening to A Simple Word. If you found this reflection helpful, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.